At 6:14 a.m., Kimora touched something in her husband's jacket pocket that didn't belong there. Not a phone, not a receipt, not a weapon. Something worse. Something that explained every cold glance, every late-night whisper, every argument that ended with her husband, Jalen, saying, "If people knew what you really think about me, it would ruin everything." By sundown, millions would watch the moment everything collapsed, because the whole world would be tuned into a TikTok live stream that no one could believe was real. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss our weekly deep dive stories. Kimora Williams was 34 years old, a mother of two, and someone you'd probably follow on TikTok without thinking twice. She had that kind of energy, warm, funny, the type who could turn grocery store drama into a viral video. Her content was relatable, mostly harmless stories about marriage, motherhood, and navigating life with a man who, in her words, has zero chill. Her followers loved her. She'd built a community of over 200,000 people who tuned in every week to hear her talk about everything from burnt dinners to miscommunication with her husband. On the surface, Kimora's life looked like the kind of chaos everyone could relate to. But underneath, something was breaking, and the cracks were starting to show. Her husband, Jalen, was 38, quiet, calculating, and almost invisible compared to his wife. He didn't post on social media. He didn't like being in her videos. Friends described him as polite but distant, the kind of man who smiled when he had to, but rarely spoke unless spoken to. Kimora used to joke that he was her opposite, that she was the loud one and he was the thinker. But over the last year, that dynamic had shifted. Jalen wasn't just quiet anymore. He was controlling. He monitored her phone. He asked her to delete certain posts. He'd stand in the background during her live streams with his arms crossed, watching. And when she asked him why, he'd say the same thing every time. "You don't know what people are capable of. You're too careless." At first, she thought he was just worried, but eventually she realized he wasn't protecting her. He was protecting himself. Neighbors had noticed the tension too. One woman who lived 2 doors down later told investigators that she'd heard muffled arguments through the walls, usually late at night. Another neighbor mentioned seeing Kimora sitting in her car in the driveway for long stretches, just staring at her phone. The truth is, no one really knew what was happening inside that home, and by the time they did, it was already too late. What her followers didn't know was that Jalen had a secret, a deeply personal one, a fetish that he'd hidden from everyone, his friends, his family, even Kimora for the first few years of their marriage. When she finally discovered it, she didn't judge him, she tried to understand. But Jalen couldn't let it go. He was consumed by shame, terrified that anyone would find out. He made her promise never to speak about it, not to his sister, not to his therapist, not even in private. And for a while, she kept that promise. But as her platform grew, so did the pressure to share. And slowly, carefully, she started testing the waters. A joke here, a vague reference there. Nothing explicit, nothing that would expose him. But Jalen noticed, and he started to unravel. He began checking her phone while she slept. He'd scroll through her messages, her drafts, her deleted videos. When she asked him about it, he denied everything. "You're paranoid," he'd say. "I'm just looking out for you." But Kimora wasn't paranoid. She was right. Then one night, everything changed. Kimora was scrolling through the comments on one of her videos when she saw a message from a stranger. It was cryptic, unsettling. The person claimed they knew something about Jalen. They said they'd seen him in certain online spaces, communities that Kimora didn't even know existed. The message was vague but specific enough to make her stomach turn. She didn't respond. She didn't even tell Jalen. But that night, while he was asleep, she went through his things. She checked his laptop, his old emails, his hidden files. And that's when she found the burner phone, tucked inside the inner pocket of a jacket he hadn't worn in months. She didn't know what she'd find when she turned it on, but what she saw made her hands shake. Messages, dozens of them, conversations with strangers, people who shared his obsession, and worse, screenshots of her, stories about her, posts about their private life shared without her knowledge or consent. Jalen had been living a double life, and she was part of it, whether she wanted to or not. The next morning, at exactly 6:14 a.m., Kimora sat on the edge of their bed with the burner phone in her lap. Jalen was still asleep. She stared at the screen, reading message after message, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Her heart was pounding, her throat was tight. When Jalen finally woke up, she was standing in the doorway holding the phone. He didn't say anything at first, he just stared at her, his face blank, emotionless. And then, quietly, he said, "You weren't supposed to find that." Kimura asked him how long he'd been doing this, how many people knew about her, whether any of them knew where they lived. Jalen didn't answer. He just sat up, ran his hand through his hair and said, "If you tell anyone about this, it'll destroy me. You understand that, right?" She told him she'd already told her sister. His expression changed instantly. The calm was gone. His jaw tightened. "You did what?" he said, his voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" For the next several hours they argued. Kimura tried to leave multiple times, but Jalen refused to let her leave. He wasn't physically violent, but his presence was enough to trap her. He paced the room, muttering to himself, accusing her of ruining everything. At one point, he grabbed her phone and scrolled through her messages, checking to see who else she'd told. When he saw that she'd drafted a TikTok post about keeping secrets in marriage, he lost it. "You were going to post about this? You were going to put me on blast for the whole world to see?" Kimura swore she wasn't. She told him the draft was just her processing her feelings. But Jalen didn't believe her. And that's when he made a decision. If she was going to talk about him online, he was going to make sure he controlled the narrative. Later that evening, Kimura scheduled a live stream. She didn't tell Jalen. She just opened TikTok, turned on the camera, and started talking. At first it was innocent, light, the kind of content her followers expected. She talked about her day, answered a few questions, and joked about marriage being complicated. But within minutes, thousands of people had joined. The chat was moving so fast she could barely keep up. People were asking about her husband. They wanted to know why she seemed off. And Kimura, exhausted and emotionally drained, started to open up. She didn't give details, she didn't name names, but she hinted at something. A betrayal, a secret, a feeling that she'd been living with someone she didn't really know. And that's when Jalen walked into the frame. The chat exploded. People thought it was planned, that he was going to join the live stream and they'd have some kind of couples Q&A. But the look on his face told a different story. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't relaxed. He was staring at Kimura with an intensity that made viewers uncomfortable. Someone in the chat typed, "Is he okay?" Another person said, "This feels weird." Jalen started talking. He told the viewers that Kimura had been lying about him, that she'd been trying to humiliate him for months. He said she didn't care about his privacy, that she only cared about views and likes. Kimura tried to defend herself, but he cut her off. He leaned closer to the camera and said, "You all think you know her, but you don't. You have no idea what she's really like." The comments were flying. People were telling her to call someone. Others were saying this had to be fake. But the fear in Kimura's eyes was real, and so was the anger in Jalen's voice. She tried again to end the stream, but he wouldn't let her. He stood between her and the door, blocking her exit. And that's when people started calling 911. Within minutes, neighbors were banging on the door. Someone had posted the address in the comments, and people who lived nearby rushed over. The live stream was still going. And then suddenly, the stream went black. The phone had either been knocked over or turned off, but the damage was done. Police arrived within 8 minutes. Officers broke through the front door and found Kimura sitting on the floor, shaking, her arms wrapped around her knees. Jalen was standing a few feet away, his hands up, insisting that everything was fine. "We were just talking," he said. "This is all a misunderstanding." But the officers didn't see it that way. They saw a woman in distress. They saw a man who'd blocked her from leaving, and they saw thousands of witnesses who'd watched the whole thing unfold in real time. Jalen was taken into custody. Kimura was evaluated by paramedics and later taken to the hospital for observation. And the internet, as it always does, exploded. Clips from the live stream were shared across every platform. People dissected every word, every gesture, every moment of tension. Hashtags started trending. Strangers who'd never heard of Kimura before were suddenly experts on her marriage. But the truth was more complicated than either side wanted to admit. This wasn't just about a live stream. It was about years of secrecy, shame, and a relationship that had been crumbling long before the camera was ever turned on. In the days that followed, investigators dug deeper. They seized Jalen's burner phone and discovered a trail of messages that painted a disturbing picture. He had been part of online communities where people shared explicit fantasies, many of which involved their partners without consent. He'd posted about Kimura, describing her in ways that violated her privacy and dignity. And worse, he had been in contact with people who encouraged him to take control of the situation if she ever tried to expose him. One message, sent just 2 days before the livestream, read, "If she goes public, you know what you have to do." Investigators flagged it immediately. This wasn't just about embarrassment, this was about power, control, and a man who felt backed into a corner. During questioning, Jalen maintained that he never intended to hurt Kimura. He said he was just trying to protect himself from public humiliation. He claimed that her growing platform made him feel vulnerable, that he was afraid she'd reveal